They feel brain foggy. They feel, less concentration for what they want to do. They can't do deep work. And then there's also this epidemic of loneliness layer that has been kind of sitting on the heels of this.
The secular world tries to tell you, oh, the universe doesn't have a center.
Which is just like, are you smoking dope? I don't think they could do it, Mrs. Pibb.
Yeah.
This would be quite a crisis in marketing, right?
His or her, they Pibb.
It would be they Pibb. Fred.
His, her, them, they Pibb.
That's it. Try and figure that one out.
Greetings to the brightest audience in the country. Welcome to Real Science Radio. I'm Fred Williams.
And I'm Doug McBurney, Bible student, science geek, amateur comedian. Fred, people may not recall, but Bob Enyart launched this broadcast as Real Science Friday in response to NPR's leftist propaganda, dressed up in scientific garb and painfully doled out every Friday like gruel at a Soviet soup kitchen by Ira Flatow and other propagandists. You know, Fred, NPR calls it Science Friday. And keeping that in mind, it's good to be with you again, Fred, talking about real science on Friday.
Happy New Year, Doug.
Hey!
It's the new year, and we're going to give our top 3 New Year's resolutions for science.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, Fred, same to you. Happy New Year. I'm excited, by the way, to tell our audience that we have big plans for 2025. For starters, we have some pretty big name scientists that have agreed to come on the show, but I'm not ready to spill all the beans yet, Fred.
Okay, well, Doug, one of these guys, I'll just give the audience a clue. He had a video on TED Talk. The TED Talk channel is really popular, so you're doing really well if you get on TED Talks. And he got banned. They kicked him off TED Talks.
Sounds perfect for us.
Yeah, he upended, the apple cart on some mainstream science. And of course, the secular world isn't going to like that. So he's going to be a guest that we're going to have on. We're also going to have a molecular biologist on the show who's going to help us deal with one of the claims that Professor Dave just keeps doubling down on. It just amazes me that he does this. So, and by the way, for those who missed our tussle with Professor Dave, you can go back to last week's show, in fact, and we have we dealt with 2 of the problems of I think there's at least 26 to 29 problems that he has that he's wrong about. We dealt with the 2 that we thought were the funnest to attack right away. So go back last week and you'll see our response to Professor Dave's response to our debunking of his alleged debunking of creation science.
I think you followed the chain all the way back, Fred. Great job. That's right. Professor David James, as his mom calls him. When she catches him in a lie. Now, Fred, we've got the ball rolling here. He's going to have to answer real challenges to his propaganda, dressed up as science, whenever he promotes the Big Bang and evolution and millions and billions of years. Anyway, later in the show, we'll mention ways, by the way, that you can help us. You can invest in this ministry, a ministry we intend to reap eternal rewards as we continue to grow and we reach more of the lost and edify more of the saints. I mean, right now, Fred, we're approaching 5,000 subscribers. And with the help of you out there in the audience, we have a stretch goal to double that. In the next 6 months, we want to reach, 9,000. No, we want to break 10,000. And we just want to respond to more atheists of renown so that we can reach their audience.
Okay, so let's get to the top 3 science resolutions for the new year. And just for our audience, we get a lot of news stories. We get it from our producers. We get it from the audience. We just get it from watching news feeds ourselves. And we always try to pick the jewels of the bunch because, Doug, if we, went with all the ones that are just great, we wouldn't have time to do it. We only have so much time to do a show.
Right.
So we try to pick our best ones. So here's our top 3 that we picked that we think are, they're good New Year's resolutions.
Okay, and Fred, before you do that, at the end of the show, we're just going to share a little bit of a letter that we're going to send out to some of our longtime supporters. Just wanted to give a heads up. We don't want to forget that.
Okay. So number 3, stop rotting your brain. So this is from just last week, Doug, December 29th, right?
Okay, well, Fred, the election's over, so hasn't at least some level of brain rot must have fallen away.
Yeah.
No, this is different. This is serious. This is a clinical study.
So this is from a story on December 29th, so just last week. A warning issued over brain rot, the 2024 habit that's on the rise, and this was reported on Australia's leading news site. So doctors are warning those guilty of a bad habit that's booming in popularity to be careful, so it can seriously damage our brains. The doctors are issuing a warning that after brain rot was chosen by the Oxford University Press as its word of the year. Now, that's the Oxford University Press, Doug, and it's the word of the year. This is 2 words, brain rot. So that's, so aside from that, that's
they have some trouble counting at Oxford these days, but don't be alarmed about that.
Yeah, they say there's 3 kinds of people in the world, those who can count, those who can't, but I digress. So the phrase has boomed in popularity among Gen Z, largely as a direct result of young people's lack of moderation when watching online material. Yeah, no shock there. So, far from being a new slang word, the term refers to the potential medical impacts of continuously scrolling through social media apps like TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. It's a habit known as doom scrolling.
Oh, doom scrolling. Yeah. I'll tell you one thing about Gen Z. They certainly have a way with words.
Yeah, they do. So according to the Oxford University Press, that same group that doesn't know how to count, brain rot is defined as the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state after the overconsumption of material considered to be trivial or unchallenging. And, Doug, we've been told, we know that there's an attention span problem. And even with YouTube, to try to get your videos listened to, you got to try to get to the point right away. And that's part of why we started doing shorts. So Real Science Radio, you can start watching shorts, which are 1-minute videos, 1 minute or less. But we actually try to have things that aren't trivial or unchallenging. I know, Doug, you could attest to that with just some of the interesting facts of the week.
Well,
they're not trivial and they're not unchallenging.
No, they're certainly not unchallenging since I miss most of them. But hey, Fred, so one thing my dad taught me is that real men are never seen in shorts. I mean, unless you're on vacation, like in the Riviera, but we're doing them for the sake of the younger audience. But Fred, this isn't just young people, because I think I've experienced this myself. In fact, I've developed a habit of forcing myself to get up out of the chair and get outside of the house or outside of the building. Literally, I force myself outside whenever I realize, and it's usually because my backside's getting numb. And I think there may be a direct correlation to, if your backside's getting numb, there's a pretty good chance that this side's getting numb. And maybe you should get up and get out from behind the screen, right?
Yeah, it may be another form of neuroplastic atrophy. And so there's a study, such as the one in Frontiers in Psychology from 2023. It has shown that endless passive consumption of trivial content can lead to what's called neuroplastic atrophy. Translation: your brain gets lazy. Instead of building robust neural connections through challenging activities like problem solving or learning, it weakens from too much mindless swipe and scroll. And so there's a behavioral neuroscientist, Dr. Kyra Bobinet, and she just had a clip show up on Fox Digital News, Science News. And let's play that clip really quick.
It's in the zeitgeist that people have really difficulty with their attention span. They feel brain foggy. They feel, less concentration for what they want to do. They can't do deep work. And then there's also this epidemic of loneliness layer that has been kind of sitting on the heels of this, because we can't really focus on anything, including relationship building. And so that stuckness that people feel with brain rot is really the habenula going on because it's been shown to go on when you doom scroll. It's been shown to be triggered by those kinds of activities. And so when we're online too much and we don't find what we need, or we feel dissatisfied, even in a tiny way, if this activates, then we're not going to feel motivated to do anything for ourselves for the rest of the day.
Okay, so that was Dr. Kyra Bobinette. She's the author of Unstoppable Brain. And as she mentioned in that clip, people, their brain starts feeling foggy, they have less concentration, and they have less motivation. I mean, it sounds like our marijuana shows, Doug, if you think about it.
Right.
So this is just another thing that kind of affects the brain. And, we've got, we want to let our audience be aware. Watch out for brain rot. We know we've got a lot of listeners, maybe have kids going to public schools, and, Lord willing, they yank them out of there and send them to Christian school or homeschool them. But there are remedies for this, right, Doug? Well, there's a doctor came up with some things you can do.
But hey, Fred, before we get to the doctor's solutions, I just wanted to quote one of the authors in the clinical article from Frontiers in Psychology, who said that this practice of mindless scrolling, endless consumption of trivial content, I think is what they called it. He said, quote, "It's like feeding your brain a steady diet of candy when it's begging for veggies and protein. The result is reduced attention spans, impaired memory, difficulty focusing." And then he says this is a phenomenon sometimes nicknamed digital dementia. So I don't know about you, Fred, but my brain, my body has never begged for veggies and protein, ever. I've pretty much always had to force the veggies, and I've always had to force the good stuff in. I've always had to make a conscious decision, especially if there were Fruit Loops available. If there's Fruit Loops available. So I think what the psychologists may not fully comprehend is that there is no begging for veggies and protein on the part of our body or our mind, and this is one of the reasons welfare is so evil and corrosive, Fred, is that for most people, if you give them an opportunity to endlessly consume trivial content, that's what they'll do with their life, and that's what we have to be careful about.
Yeah. Yeah, so this Dr. Zach, he gave a list of things to do to kind of try to prevent this, so let's just quickly go through them. He suggests move your apps off your home screen, so out of sight, out of mind. Set screen time limits so phones have the ability to do that. Doom scroll with intention, so if you must scroll, set a goal. Are you looking for news updates, a cute dog video? And then schedule screen-free zones, no phones at dinner, things like that. So we're going to leave it up to our very bright audience to figure out how you're going to deal with this with both yourself and with your loved ones. I mean, I know I've caught myself sometimes. I don't do the scrolling through shorts and stuff, but sometimes I just get into this brainless stuff, some of the brainless stuff I'll watch. And and it's just, Yeah,
and so typical of liberals is that all of these psychologists, they give you a list of rules to make for yourself so that you can't. Well, I'm telling you that you can't set rules for yourself that make it so you can't. That doesn't work because we're sinful and we're fallen. What you need to do is become otherwise interested and motivated. Get interested and motivated in other things by getting up off the chair and going and doing something else. You might be surprised. You might find it interesting.
That's right. Okay, so Doug, we're going to get to number 2.
All right.
And before we do, and this has to do with aliens, we did want to quickly mention our RSR Project 2025.
That's right, our very own Project 2025. And Fred, we didn't hire any outside consultants for this. We did not have a committee funded by donors working on our Project 2025. This is an organic project.
It is. And it's kind of our in-house advertising for this video. We're going to advertise for ourselves because we want your help. Our number one priority at Real Science Radio has always been sharing the truth of the gospel with as many people as we can in order to hasten the fullness of the Gentiles. So why RSR? Why Real Science Radio? So we put heavier emphasis on the more tangible sciences of genetics, biology, and chemistry, and to some degree physics, as opposed to the more subjective and abstract sciences such as mineralogy, paleontology, geology, and geophysics, that honestly and frankly, we believe that some of the dear Christian brothers, our creation friends at CMI, Answers in Genesis, ICR to some degree, and definitely CRS, they seem to be a little too top-heavy in these more abstract sciences. And so there's the famous creationist apologetics verse from Romans 1:20. So we want to make a biblical case of why we take the approach we do. And that's God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. And the word made could just as easily read designed or engineered. In Hebrews 3:4, it says, "For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God." People know every house has a builder, and therefore will know that even more complex living things must also have a builder. And finally, Jesus also taught, if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works. Jesus' works were 100% concrete miracles that people witnessed with their own eyes, not something described by theory or mathematics. So we believe there's much truth in Nikola Tesla's words. We're going to throw in a secular reference that he said this: today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. So while we say that, we also highly value both historical and forensic science, and we believe both are capable of providing sufficient proof of that which is being investigated. So we actually here at Real Science Radio, we resist the claim that you can't prove anything that isn't a repeatable experiment. So we don't adhere to that. We think historical and forensic science can prove things like Jesus truly rose from the dead. We have concrete proof of that. And Bob is always careful to present topics that have been carefully vetted. So we do the same thing. We've continued that tradition. And we have a production team that helps us with choosing speakers and topics. And while we do often partner with our friends in the intelligent design movement, we're more aligned with their approach in certain ways. We also hold strongly to the historical account of Genesis that places the earth at roughly 6,000 to 7,000 years old. Both of these, both appealing to design, God's invisible attributes, and the historical account in Genesis, we believe are both critical to reaching the lost who have been indoctrinated in both millions of years and evolution. So we don't place any requirement on our speakers that we bring in to hold those views, as long as the reason for their appearance is to either bolster or in a way debate a position that we support. So we will always stand by Genesis. That's our foundation. And finally, Bob is always resistant to having guests on the show who do not provide something new unless it was something we believed worth consideration that was otherwise suppressed or censored by groupthink. And believe me, groupthink happens everywhere, and it happens in creation circles too. And, we've witnessed that with many of the things we talked about here. Now, I want to make it clear, though, we are dear friends with all the major creation groups. But what RSR does is we fill a void for those dissenting creationist positions, such as the hydroplate theory and plasma cosmology. So at Real Science Radio, our primary emphasis will be on observable phenomena with a secondary focus on the more abstract and subjective areas such as geology and paleontology. This is how we believe we can more effectively reach the lost, just as the Apostle Paul outlined in Romans 1 and Hebrews 3.
Amen. Preach it. All right. Yeah. So anyway, one of those things that we can observe, by the way, is the Bible. which is one of the keys to understanding origins and creation science is the Bible. And back to Romans 1, Fred, because we have the Bible and because we have the things that we can see that were obviously created, the Bible says of all of us, they are without excuse. There is no excuse. And we're here to help people realize that they are without excuse when it comes to the creation especially.
That's right. So we've sent out an email to people who we had their email addresses. If you want to get this letter, our RSR Project Plan 2025, please contact us, provide us your email, and we'll get you a copy of that Project 2025 for RSR. Yeah. So, Doug, number two. All
right, well, here we are.
On our scientific New Year's resolutions. Stop getting spooked by Spock.
Spooked by Spock. One of my favorite topics is aliens. And I'm so glad, Fred, that we made it through November without the deep state unveiling the aliens. I was actually concerned about that because we talk about brain rot and where people are these days and what they might fall for, and you just never know. So we have an article from another one from Fox News. Luis Elizondo. Are you familiar with Luis, Fred?
I think I've heard of this person. And by the way, this is from Christmas Day.
Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And it's Luis with a Z, not with a S-E. Luis is a guy. How do we know he's a guy? Look at his picture. He's chunky. He's got something of a beard and a bunch of tattoos. He looks very masculine, Luis does. Now, he's... Fox News says he's the former head of the Defense Department's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. He and other witnesses, Fred, testified before the Congress back in November about an alleged group within the government hiding the fact that, quote, we are not alone in the cosmos. And Luis Elizondo said of that fact in his testimony, he said, quote, I believe that we as Americans can handle the truth. And I think he said it just the exact same way that the actor said it. His name escapes me. That's embarrassing because he's a very famous guy. And so that's a point in my favor, Fred, that I can't remember the very famous actor's name because it's been so long since I consumed any media. But anyway,
good for you. But that was Jack Nicholson. So
Jack Nicholson. How do you forget Jack Nicholson, for crying out? That's pretty bad. It could just be that I've got either brain rot or early stage Alzheimer's. But let me just comment, Fred, real quick on Mr. Elizondo. So the fact, Mr. Elizondo, that you claim that you finished your career in a defense bureaucracy initiated by, like, the godfather of the deep state, Harry Reid, initiated this defense, whatever it is, department, sub-department of a department of a department at the Aerospace Threat Identification, whatever it is. So it was started by Harry Reid, and then it was signed off on by America's dumbest president, George W. Bush. There's no doubt about that. So just that, I mean, that gives me some pause as to taking you seriously. And then the fact that he got into this bureaucracy and somehow remained politically correct long enough to get to the top of the pile in the bureaucracy, mostly during the Obama administration, by the way. And then finally, the fact, Mr. Elizondo, that you have a book out that you're promoting, it just doesn't make your testimony particularly compelling to me. And then second, the fact that you quote a fictitious character from a movie. Now, the movie, I remember the title, Fred, A Few Good Men.
You can't handle the truth.
I got that. Anyway, the fact that you quote that in your testimony, I mean, it makes me wonder if you've maybe suspended disbelief one time too many and you've just gone totally around the bend.
Well, you know, Doug, I don't know if you remember, the number one first thing that the Clintons did when they got in the office was they were going to unveil the Roswell, you know, the alien landing. And
That's
you know
right.
what? So if there really was something with Area 51 and there really was aliens there, I guarantee you the liberals would be pushing that all over the media. There would have been somebody, we got to keep it top secret because of this and that, you know, the technology. No, they would have leaked it to the media, to somebody, because they want there to be aliens. And I tried to think of an analogy, Doug, and one that I don't know why it came to my mind, but it's like the KJV only crowd, you know, the King James version only crowd.
Okay.
That it's the one only true translation of the Bible. You know, Bob Inyard had a really good debate with a KJV only guy, and Bob actually went out and he looked at the original KJV, King James Bible, used that as part of his debate, and well, the guy he was debating quit, so that kind of gives you an idea who won that debate, right? I mean, I think that thing just ended. So anyways, for the King James only, it made me think, okay, too bad for the Japanese, you know, so I guess God favored only the people who understand English.
Oh, yeah.
So how does this relate to this whole alien thing? And by the way, I met our fantastic producer for our radio show, the guy who puts all of our content on KLTT, the blowtorch of the Rockies.
Yes.
And yes, Professor Dave, we are on the radio. We have been for many decades.
That's right.
So Jamie Schofield, I met him in a booth at a fair in downtown Denver, and he was debating somebody who was a KJV only guy, and Jamie did just a fantastic job of, you know, showing him why the King James only isn't the only true translation of the Bible. So anyways, here's the analogy. Too bad for those aliens, since the Earth, really, the scientific evidence shows that we are the center of the universe. So the aliens are then coming from somewhere that isn't the center. You know, I guess unless they're maybe in our Milky Way, but it's, you know, too bad for them because we've had this scientific data. You can go to rsr.org/center, and the quantized redshifts continues to be a problem for those who hold to the, you know, the secular world tries to tell you, oh, the universe doesn't have a center.
Which is just like, are you smoking dope?
And you can go to our page, and we quote secular scientists who admit that claim is philosophical and not science. So we'll leave it up to the listener on the radio and to you watching us on YouTube. Go check out that webpage. And we're also showing a paper from September 2024, Quantized Redshift and Challenges to Big Bang Hypothesis. And then this other guy publishes a study supporting century-old theory that challenges the Big Bang, etc.
So if the universe doesn't have a center, it's the only physical thing that doesn't have a center. And that's not philosophical, that's deranged. That's deranged to think that. But hey,
it is.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you get too far down the rat hole of atheism.
Yeah, and you you live out in California. You know, the Golden State Warriors, for a long time, they were winning championships without a center.
Okay. Man.
Okay, so I digress.
That's a bone for all of our sports fans out there. Good one, Fred. That's pretty good.
Now we're down to the number one New Year's resolution for science. But before we do that, Doug, we almost forgot. We got to do our interesting fact of the week.
Yo, interesting fact of the week, Fred. I almost forgot. Having so much fun. Okay.
All right. What causes an aurora?
An aurora.
Yeah.
Well, there's a city like Denver that gets too big, and then eventually they have to do a suburb, and also in Chicago. No?
You want to take another shot?
Okay, so you're talking about an aurora in space where you see let's say you have a body in space, but then there's glowing around the body. Is that
aurora borealis? Think of that. Now, what could cause that?
So
speaking of aliens and whatnot,
Yeah. So what would cause that aurora would be heat and light energy emitted from the body, and then interference by particles between us and the body.
Playtime.
Okay. Not bad. That's kind of close.
Okay.
So it's charged particles from solar winds that slow down when they reach our atmosphere.
Well, I was hitting around the bullseye, but...
You were.
Yeah.
So charged particles from solar winds. We've talked about solar winds, and it's one of the things that helped, get the asteroids and comets away from Earth and spread them around, our solar system. It's all part of the hydroplate theory. We've had Dr. Rob Brown talk about, solar winds and its impact. So
that's right.
Anyways, Doug, you were pretty close.
Well, and so we thank Walt Brown for doing the math on how the solar winds would have affected the various bodies that were ejected from the planet and how it all explains what we observe, which again, we like to talk about what we can observe. And one thing we can observe are comets and asteroids that lend pretty good credence to the idea of the hydroplate theory. If you're not familiar, check it out. Go to rsr.org/hydroplate.
Yeah. And we love math here at Real Science Radio, but we want to make sure that we can, we have evidence that can substantiate it, evidence that we observe with our own eyes.
There you go. Speaking of that, Fred, let's get to this the number one article contributed this week, Fred, and it was a hat tip to John, our infamous creation curmudgeon, who now he has to go by climate curmudgeon, for giving us the number one New Year's resolution for science: stop falling for climate hysteria around carbon dioxide. Right, Fred?
That's right. And so this is actually, the article itself was on the dailyskeptic.org. And what this article, it starts out with: dramatic evidence has been published in a number of recent science papers that carbon dioxide levels are already saturated, meaning little or no further warming is to be expected, and that rising carbon dioxide levels are all beneficial.
Whoa. So it's like the whole Dr. Pepper theory, Fred, because, there used to be Dr. Pepper, which was good, right? But then you could get the Dr. Pepper 1024. Remember that? Dr. Pepper 1024 was saturated, and it was
you could also get Mr. Pibb.
Now, Mr. Pibb was okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Pibb is kind of a shadow of the 1024, though. But
but wasn't that, what's it called? What do they call Trump? They say a misogynist. Isn't that misogyny? There's not a Mrs. Pibb, but, I digress.
Whatever happened to Mrs. Pibb? Well, yeah. Fred, if they reintroduce that brand, because I don't know that they sell Mr. Pibb anymore. I would have to look into that. But if they did, they would either have to drop the Mr. or Fred, I don't think they could do a Mrs. Pibb. Yeah. This would be quite a crisis in marketing.
His or her, they Pibb.
It would be they Pibb. Fred.
His, her, them, they Pibb.
That's it. We'll try and figure that one out.
Yeah.
But Fred, tell me more about how is it that CO2 levels could actually reach a saturation point? You're saying that after it reaches this saturation point, there's good evidence that it no longer is a threat for warming?
That's right. So this article goes on: half of human emissions are being quickly pushed back into the biosphere, causing substantial famine-busting plant growth, while the rest is entering a saturated atmosphere and having a minimal effect on global temperatures. So one of the papers accepting the human involvement in rising carbon dioxide is published by the Carbon Dioxide Coalition, which notes, we like carbon dioxide, so should you. And without carbon dioxide, Doug, we'd all be dead. We wouldn't have plants. I mean, we need carbon dioxide. So
Fred, wait a minute, Fred.
It's amazing.
Fred, it sounds like that these so-called scientists at the CO2 Coalition, they're actually implying that CO2 is good for plants? Is that?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
do they have any evidence to back this up? What kind of outrageous claim is this?
It's So again, these are peer-reviewed papers.
I think so.
I got to go with, they had so this is a commentary within this article that's talking about these science papers. And they noted this, and they hit it right on the head. The opinion that humans control the climate thermostat by releasing carbon dioxide, leading to runaway temperatures, belongs to a dark period in science when it was captured to promote political aims.
Whoa,
global warming, climate change has long been a political. It's amazing how many people, they want to put you in jail if you're a climate denier. And yet, when you support climate change like they do, as Dr. Paul Homan, Paul Homan, the head meteorologist for the Air Force Academy, as he pointed out, and we've heard from others, you could be killing millions of people like in Africa because they're not getting the resources they need to survive because you're promoting all this stuff on a false narrative that carbon dioxide is causing global warming and again, end all life as we know it. I still remember, Doug, a Sports Illustrated cover that had the Miami Stadium where the Miami Dolphins play. It would have been covered in water by now, and that was years ago. And I know it was like, I think I'd have to take a wild guess, but at least a decade ago, that thing should have already been covered by water. Mm-hmm. It's one of, Al Gore in his book, all of his predictions have proven wrong. So anyways, but Doug, how many people have bought into the lies? I looked that up for this show.
Lots, Fred, lots. And people, it would shock you. Christian people, sensible, reasonable people have bought into this. And I think, Fred, it's because they haven't taken the time to actually look into it, and they just generally assume that all this fun we're having, it must be destroying the planet.
Yeah. And, we want to be good stewards of Earth. I get that. But
of course.
There's, this climate change thing it's fake science, no question about it. And the one, I guess, slightly encouraging thing is there's still enough of resistance against it. Like we're showing a chart right now of, if you're a Democrat, how much you think it's a threat and how much it is if you're a Republican, and then if you look at all the United States adults, it's growing in number who think it's a problem. But in the last 4 or 5 years, it's actually dropped a little bit for all U.S. adults. It's around 54%. But we got to keep still fighting this battle, Doug, because when you overreact and you buy into this all climate change nonsense, they didn't like global warming, so they changed it to climate change because everybody agrees that climate changes. So they got embarrassed by that for global warming, and so it's climate change. So
yeah, I think that was right. I think they changed it, Fred, right around 2009 when the IPCC emails came out and proved unequivocally that they were all lying and faking the data. It was all there in their own private emails that were leaked. Do people not remember that this was all debunked like 15 years ago? Anyway.
Yeah. So the article mentions 8 Taiwanese scientists, and they found that the sensitivity of climate to the rise of carbon dioxide atmospheric levels from 100 to 400 parts per million was, quote, negligibly small.
Wait, Fred, 100 to 400 parts per million, that's a 4 times increase in CO2. It could be catastrophic.
I know it. So here it is. So if you raise it from 100 to 400 parts per million, the effect was negligibly small. Do you know how small that number is if it's negligibly small? Not just small, Doug. It's negligibly small.
I know negligibly in English means it could be there or it could not be there, and it wouldn't really make any difference.
Yeah. And so it's 0.3 degrees Celsius. 0.3. That's the impact of going from 100 to 400 parts per million. Just like you said, 4 times the amount. It only has an impact on temperature of 0.3 degrees Celsius. And there's more, Doug. There's earlier this year, a group of Polish scientists led by Dr. Jan Kubicki supplied 3 papers arguing that above 400 parts per million, quote, the carbon dioxide concentration can no longer cause any increase in temperature.
That's the saturation you were talking about.
Exactly. And then in 2023, 3 scientists, including atmospheric professor Yi Huang of McGill University, stated that, quote, transmission in the carbon dioxide band center is unchanged by increased carbon dioxide as the absorption is already saturated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought?
And we could go on and on. We could go on and on this.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of deserts that are greening from the rising of carbon dioxide. Now, Doug, would you rather have a dead desert or one that's starting to get vegetation?
Yeah, I like the green. I thought the greens, I thought they liked the green. You would think that they would want more green. And Fred, it's January. 0.3 degrees Celsius up, I would take that. Almost anywhere,
I'll take that any
right?
day of the week. Yeah. And so here's a more recent paper in 2024 found that greening had actually accelerated in the last 2 decades. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The increase in carbon dioxide was found to be the dominant driver of the positive trend of the leaf area index over most of the global land surface.
And that's the picture there, Fred, with all the nice, beautiful green areas, right?
Yeah.
And when you see green, You know that cows can eat that green, which means more steak. How can that be bad?
Well, because if they eat that stuff, they might burp, and then the burp causes more global warming, and yeah.
It's a doom loop.
So anyways.
It's a doom loop, Fred. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Whoa,
So here's the number one New Year's resolution for all of us out there who are listening to our show or watching us on YouTube. Please stop this whole, carbon dioxide global warming nonsense. As Dr. Paul Homan said, most of the greenhouse effect is caused by water vapor.
Hello.
Yeah, water vapor from like a big volcano that erupted in the Pacific, and it'll change temperatures a little bit. But honestly, Doug, I've kind of enjoyed the last couple of years. It's been pretty nice. The summer, our winter here in Colorado, we've had quite a few Indian summer days where it's like 60 degrees. It feels like, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's been
so
pretty
we
good.
do need to be good stewards, no doubt about it. Be good stewards of our environment, but let's not get overboard. And ban natural gas and the things that burn clean and
right.
So
what we should do, Fred, is when you stop and you realize how good we have it, which none of us do this enough, is to just stop for a moment and consider how good we have it. Instead of feeling guilty about that because deep down you don't deserve it, just fall down on your face and thank God for it. Just thank God for it, and then you won't have to struggle with all this guilt of the fact that you don't deserve everything that's so wonderful that God gave us. Of course we don't deserve it. God is great. And so we just fall down and we thank Him for it, and we look to the Bible and to His Son, Jesus Christ, to help us deal with the fact that we're not worthy. And then you don't have to freak out and feel guilty about destroying the world.
Yep. All right, Doug. So that's our top 3, and there's so many more we could have done, but we're out of time. And we promise our audience going into the new year, we've got some really exciting speakers coming on the show. And please, if you can, go to rsr.org/donate. We're starting to kick up some more production efforts.
Yeah.
And we've got a good production team that's joining us. And they're going to start producing some of our videos. They're already producing great shorts on our channel. Please subscribe, like our videos, dislike our videos, be honest.
That's right.
Provide feedback. Let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. We'd love to hear from our listeners, our viewers.
Absolutely. Send us your size, small, medium, large. You can buy our shorts. So they have RSR logo on the shorts. They're really stylish. Be our next product.
I thought,
maybe?
Yeah. So should we come up with an apparel line with men's shorts with the RSR logo?
All for it. There you go.
Your dad would not be happy.
Shorts for men over 50 will be next. Maybe 2026, Fred. Let's not set our sights too high.
I don't know if I should tell the story, but I'm going to anyways.
All right.
So really quick story. So when I was newly married, I had an obnoxious friend, Pat Mundy. He's my best friend, and from high school. And my wife, she didn't quite know how to take him because he's pretty abrupt and he's very loud. And I was wearing these shorts, men's shorts, and they were kind of short. And I'm a tall guy, so and my wife hated them. And they were faded. They were kind of this orange color. And anyways, Pat shows up to the house. I open the front door. And Sandy peeks her head out and goes, "Pat, what do you think of these shorts?" He literally ripped them off my bottom. Boom. At that point forward, my wife started liking Pat Mundy. So anyways, that's the testimony to your dad.
Well, and there's a
men should not wear shorts.
That's a testimony to the good sense that you had in picking Sandy for a wife, is that she recognizes that real men should not be seen in shorts.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks, Doug. And Doug, Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year to you, Fred. Yep. Happy New Year, everybody.
So for my co-host, Doug McBurney, I'm Fred Williams of Real Science Radio. May God bless you.